I am Katherine Dang. Okay, people swear by my name. Dang word. But I am first generation American-born Chinese. My parents came from China before communism, so I cover almost 100 years there. But I consider God's invisible work in my life even before I was born. I would be in China today and probably an atheist of some kind if they had not come, because they came 2 years before communism took over. And I was born just before then. So I don't mind telling you how old I am, because that's God's providence. But I became a Christian when I was 9 years old. And my parents were not Christians. There's a real providential preparation for them. They didn't become Christians till they were aged. But I became a Christian when I was 9 and was brought up in good church with Bible teaching. And that was God's provision for me. This is before worship teams. This is our old school church, okay? We dressed up for church, no blue jeans or shorts, no coffee, no donuts. Women wore hats. We wore high heels and, dressed up for church. It was formal. It was good training for me and my brothers and sister. And I did not grow up among Chinese. My parents had a laundry, a Chinese laundry. I'm glad it wasn't a restaurant. I'd probably be waiting tables today. But it was a laundry, and we lived in the laundry for a while. My parents came with nothing, no in language or anything, and I didn't know English until I went to school in first grade. We skipped kindergarten because they didn't know I had to go to school. So here I was sitting in a classroom just hating school, not understanding anything that was going on, no bilingual training whatsoever. But again, it was difficult, but it was part of my preparation, I think, to have compassion on those that I would meet eventually who come to this country and didn't know anything like I knew. They were just like me when I was 6 years old. So having to learn to read in English and understand the language. I didn't learn from television like some people did. I just had to be in a classroom where there was no understanding, and nothing really came into understanding until maybe second grade. I learned to read and understand a little bit better. But I became a Christian when I was 9 years old, and everything seemed to come together and make sense for me. I have to tell you, when I first went to church, I didn't know anything about God. I was really pagan. And in that class, one of the Sunday school teachers told me I was in God's house. So little old me looked up in that high ceiling. I said, God's here in this house. I thought it was really, a person. So that's when I first was introduced to the idea of God, and God began to open my heart and my mind to spiritual things. And went to public school, like everybody else. There was nothing more, and graduated eventually from the University of California. But it was in the University of California, as a believer, that God prompted me and put it in my heart to really go in the direction of Christian education, for which I had no respect, because Christian education at that time, maybe even still in some places, just a glorified Sunday school, and where people went to marry other Christians. That was basically it. And having grown in public school education and in the university, I found that there were no real answers to evolution, no answers, intelligent answers to the opposition of Scripture. And so it was, for me, a calling that was surprising. And because of my criticism of Christian education, God said, put me into Christian education, and the idea that came to my head was, well, you have to do something about that. You have to do something about that. And so, to make a long story short, I taught 9 years in a Christian school in Hayward, California. And it was there in that school I was introduced to the idea of Christian government. And I was taught government was secular, Christians should have nothing to do with politics, that was worldly, and that the only thing I should be interested in is evangelism and Christian work. And so that concept of linking government, the idea of real government, not activism, but it involved with the idea of combining or joining Christianity with the idea of politics. And but there is where I was open to the idea of God working in nations. So majored in history, didn't know anything about history to teach, and I had to go to God and say, what do I teach? I was handed public school textbooks, 1930s, very old, free, social studies. There was nothing printed at that time in the Christian curriculum. That's how far back I go. And now there's just a proliferation of publications, and owing to the establishment of home education. So I asked God, where do I start? School's going to start in 2 weeks. What am I going to teach? And it was on a regular basis where I went to God, what do I do now? What do I do now? And the first thing that God said to me, start in Genesis. So that's where my beginning of God gradually just opening up those pages to me about how to interpret history. Is it about man or is it about God? And in the beginning it was about God. And just page by page, every day, what now, what now, what now? And so I'm here with this idea with you about how God works, how God has worked in history. And I want you to know that when we teach or when we think, we're thinking about God's way, and as opposed to your own way or what the world says is the way to do things. And so I want to begin with the first things that God opens up in the Bible. And what I have come to over the years is that God began with one person. And that's how God works. He begins with the individual. And an individual being, again, separate from all others. And he's concerned with the quality and with the life and the being of each one. Because he's personal to every individual. By creation, he formed us in our mother's wombs. And that's very personal. I mean, nobody knows every inch of us, every cell in us but God. And he knit our limbs together, he knit our organs together, and he knows us intimately, whether we know him or not. He has designed each one personally. And being one of a kind, he is saying to you, he too is one, and you are one. And when he made Adam, he said, it's just me and you. It's just me and you. And we're born with just God and you. And he wants you to know him. And he wants you to not only know him, but know that he loves you and that we love him because of his love for us. And that is the revelation that begins, supposedly to begin from the first day of birth, if not before. And what he began with Adam, he said that you were made to be under me. That's government. So when we talk about government, we're talking about there's only one government, and that's God's government. That's the only, when we think about government, we should think about God. And everything else has to fall under God's government, because He is the ruler. He is the ruler of the universe. He's the ruler of everything He has made. So then He begins, and there's one law I want you to understand. When He made man, He gave Adam one law to obey. One law to obey. And this means this is for everyone. And that is, don't die. Right? Eat this, don't die. And it's not that the tree was poison. It's just that to live, you live under me. You live by my rule. I'm the giver of life, and therefore I give you how to live. My way is the way of life. So when He says, outside of me, to disobey me is to die. Just so don't die. Remember, there's many ways to die. God says there's only one way to live. So when God sets and establishes life, this is the way of life. Go this way. Come under me. Let me direct you. Let me regulate and control and restrain and keep you from death. So follow me. Come under my government and you'll live. You'll have life. Now I want you to know that God, when He established family and He brought in the idea of home, again, there is only one way to establish home. We have received so many ways of living, and there's only one way of living, and there's only one way to establish the idea of home. So I want to present that to you because that is foundational to everything that is in this world. They say the first divine institution. Divine refers to that it's from God. God is a divine person. He is of heaven, is from heaven. And institution, He established something called home, and it is how it's to be governed. How He is going to govern is that the institution of home for man, for man's living, for man's existence and maintenance in this world called Earth. So there's a purpose for home. There is a way of establishing a home. And I would say I call it the law of the bridegroom because it refers to the return to the right relationship between husband and wife that was destroyed when sin came between them. And so we want to establish what history teaches us. Now, the idea of law means, what's a law? It's a rule of action. When you play a sport, when you play any board game, there are rules that go with the sport and with the game. And it says the things that you follow in order to, shall we say, have success in the sport or in the playing of some game. It's a rule of action. It's not simply something you memorize or something you just repeat, but it's just what to do and what not to do. And it's very clear. When God sets a law for home and family, it's very clear. There's no ambiguity, okay? It's not confusing. It's so simple, it's hard, but it's clear. If I can identify that for you. So it's just that we haven't paid attention, or we haven't been observing what God's word states. And it's always good to know this before marriage, isn't it? Not after the fact. But I always tell some couples, well, you know, it's never too late to have marriage. and to restore the idea into your family, especially as you grow children and direct them in God's way of life, both physical and spiritual, God's way of home. Home. So it's the idea of God's government and establishment of home. And this is the rule of the bridegroom, meaning this is how the bridegroom behaves. This is how a bridegroom acts, okay? And so right away, we've been taught that the main star of any marriage is the wife or the woman, the bride. That's Hollywood. That's Disney princess syndrome, okay? But God doesn't say that. God says the most important person in the marriage ceremony is the bridegroom. But today, bridegrooms stand up there like a wooden Indian, like a statue, and he just has to stand there in his tuxedo or whatever, and everybody stands for the bride. No. It's the groom that is the main figure. Adam was made first for a reason. So, but I want to say that what God says is supported in scripture, in history. That's why when I study history and nations, it tells me why nations fall and collapse, why any nation falls and collapses and even disappears in history. Because history tells us that whether it's a kingdom built on dynasties, you know what dynasties are, it's a string of family, a line of family members that become rulers. So, and when we study ancient times when nations or countries were ruled by kings and a string of family children, that they collapsed because that the family that is ruling becomes corrupt, and maybe begins corrupt, but the corruption of family is the downfall of nations. That's a very important idea. Today we think the collapse of nations is because somehow it has been overcome, conquered, overruled by some army or some other country. But history tells us that if you depend upon the family of a king to rule one nation, that family has to be free of corruption. And because all the whole people depend upon that king's virtue, his goodness, or the family's virtue, which is moral goodness. But if there is a lot of infighting, if there's a lot of hate and sibling rivalry, look at David's family and his kingdom and how it really collapsed during his reign because of his family situation. And the nation was wholly disrespectful of David himself and all the things that followed. And his son Solomon did not do well at all. So, the historian Lydia Sigourney, who is a student of history, and gone through all those ancient nations and even current ones, and the kingdoms, realized that the strength of a nation is the intelligent and well-ordered homes, either the homes of the king, the homes of the aristocracy, the homes of the rulers. The families is the reason for the strength of a nation. Today we think it's wealth, economy, alliances, armies, nuclear power. No, it has all to do with the condition of the families that rule or are in the nation. And so don't separate what God is doing in the United States from what is happening in your homes, in California, state by state, in your city. Right? The families in the city determine the quality of life in the city. Crime rates reflects the chaos, the hatred, shall we say, the warfare that's happening in the homes, or lack of government in the homes. And so if you depend upon one family's rule, then you depend upon the quality of that family, whether it is being ruled according to, shall we say, God's rule of the home, or it's an all absolutely rebellion of God. And we have to examine our homes. Wherever I've gone in other countries, they finally have come to the conclusion, even psychologists today say that really our nation's in trouble because of the family life. And so they said, well, we're going to reinvent the family, and we're going to change the family unit so that we have a perfect society. But you can't change what God has established. And you can't, there is no alternative but obedience to God. It's just like there's no way of living unless there's obedience to God concerning body, spirit, and mind. There's God's way and only way. I am the way, the life, and the truth. And there's nothing else beside that. The rejection of that has consequences. And we have to say that we are suffering today, whether it's in Brazil, Argentina, where I've been in Colombia, it's a consequence. So we have to deal with the cause of the consequences. And they all have said it's our home, our homes, family. It doesn't matter what race you are, what your nation is, it's about the family. How did they come to that conclusion? Well, it goes back to the creation of nations. So, well, after the flood, so God created man. Let's go back to the origin of family. First, the man. God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Now, man represents, at that point in time, the whole human race. We all come from Adam. We are all from his seed, okay? And there's no life until there's a seed. The seed has to be planted before there's any life. That's very important. The seed comes from the man. Life comes from the man. And so that's the biology of it, or that's the physiology of it, okay? It's clear. And that, when you get that idea and the ramifications of that in our proper relationship with the opposite sex is very important. What God says now, male and female, which is, of course, the human race is made of two kinds, male and female. Created he, them. That's established. That's an absolute. There's no deviation from that. And they're trying to manipulate the fact that, well, there's 102 genders. And we have learned that the deviation comes from corruption, comes from harm and damage, okay? Early damage. And so that can be shown historically as well. Now, how are we made in his own image? Male and female, both are made in the image of God. This is fundamental. God is not a physical being. He has no, shall we say, appearance. But image means likeness. Likeness. How are we similar? We're not exactly of God, but there's similarities that he wants us to build our lives on, as a male or female, okay? And so, individuality. Each one of us is one of a kind. And I think some people are happy that there's only one of you and there's only one of me. You can have 12 children and there's no duplication whatsoever. Because when God said, I made you personally, I designed you. There's no, that's why life is so precious to God. Because any loss of you is a loss that can't be replaced. irreplaceable. That's the proper idea of each other. And that what is the rarity or the singleness of each individual in the eyes of God. So the idea of individuality means you are one of a kind, and God is revealing to us, I am one of a kind. There is no other God. And we're a walking proof. There's only one true God. This is the picture of the individual. There's no cookie cutter. There's no group identity, just your own identity. When I work with homeschooling parents and they have graduation of one child, I have been to graduations where there's only one graduate because there's only the first child is graduating, and they had the whole ceremony, cap and gown and everything. But he was his class. You are in a class all yourself. So when the people ask you, well, what grade are you in? You're in your own class. And that's the way we should consider the individuality of each one. You're accountable as one. When you teach your children, or eventually you, stand before God as an individual. You don't stand as a family. You don't stand as a collection or a race. You stand as one. And part of your education is teaching them, how do I stand and give answer to God for everything I've done, for everything I've ever said. And that's the individuality, the singleness of each one. And when men and women stand together as husband and wife, they each account to God separately. You don't account to each other. Oh, you don't? I don't account to my husband, and he doesn't account to me? What's that all about? Because you stand before God as a man and a woman, a husband and a wife, and you give account to God for the laws he gave to wives and for the law he gave to husbands. You're only answerable for the law of the wife, if you're a woman, and the law of husband, if you're a man. And this is where we get a little bit uncomfortable, because but she. There's no buts in there, okay? We got to get our butts out of the way. There's no exception to that. And so, because that individual is separateness, in a sense. We have a faculty. Faculty means power. Your children are born with the power to reason. That separates us from animal life, that we can think, which means we can decide. We don't act impulsively or instinctively, like animals do. But man makes decisions. Man has a will. And so the faculty of reason, what is reason? Part of education is know the difference between what is good and what is evil. This is fundamental to every education. What is good and what is evil? Do you know the difference? Are they confused? Are they commingled? Are you don't know the difference? And so I have come down to this idea that what is good is what promotes life, what protects life, what preserves life. So if you see again food on the table, which one will promote life and which one doesn't have any nourishment and life in it for you? You see, is it natural or artificial food? And we're so full of artificial food today, there's cancer everywhere. Because cancer is a foreign radical, right? It's not natural. It's a rebellious cell, okay? That's what cancer is, rebellion in your body. And so if what is natural, then it will promote life. What's evil is the opposite. It destroys life. So when you go and choose, McDonald's or, Argentinian filet mignon, what would you choose? One's more expensive, but one's more deadly too, you see. But you have those choices all day long. Is this going to promote and protect me and preserve my life? Or is this going to destroy life? Is this friendship? Is this literature? is this television program, is that destructive to me, or is it going to promote my life, extend, give me life? So that's just that simple. It's not complicated. I don't have to write a book about it. Good is what preserves and promotes life, and evil is what destroys life and leads to death. But because we all have sinned, we all are going to die, physically. But there's a part of us that doesn't die. And people have to understand that when He made you and me, we have the breath of God in us because it came through Adam. We know when God made Adam, He just lay there. I mean, it was just a body. Now, when He made the animals and plants, they just, thrived. They just rose up and lived and were activated and animated. But Adam was just a form. The body is just a form. Interesting. Then God put His breath into the nostrils of Adam. And then he became alive. Because the part of him from God is, breath of God is eternal. His breath is eternal. Now, God had no beginning. We have a beginning, but we have no end. And we have to think about that part of us that will go on after the body is deceased and gone. That's the material part. But we are immortal. So we have to preserve the life of the soul more than the life of the body. Do you understand? That has a destination. Okay. And the soul that sins will perish. Eternally perish. Sometimes we think that depression today is something of a living death. You're like the walking dead. You're not alive, you're just physically alive, but inside you're just dead. Well, consider that for eternity, where you're just dying every day, dying forever. That comes close maybe to death with perishing eternally. But the condition of your soul is the key to the immortality that you have, the kind of life from this point. So, we have these men and women, both made in the likeness of God, which is to be respected, which is to be valued. One is not more valued than the other, nor inferior to the other. I've been told, actually by my mother, she says things that I can't let go of, okay? But one of them, we don't talk a lot, but once in a while she'll say something like this, well, in China, women are not human. That's what she said. Frustrated Chinese women come to America. And sometimes even here, that the idea that there is a class for men and a class for women. And that happened when Adam and Eve were separated by sin. We talk about the war of the sexes, the competition. Boys are stupid, girls are smart, all that business, right? I hate boys, girls are yucky. All of that, where that come from? It came from the separation of men and women when Adam and Eve were separated by their sin. So, the idea is that this is where we're equal before God. The image of God, that the worth, our own worth is our soul and our quality of ability to reason. And of course, our individuality, how precious that is. No child can replace another child. That's the individuality, individual value. And the fact that they're in your heart, as in God's heart, there's a space for every being that He's created. And that should be the fact in the family, that there is no one that can be replaced. There's going to be a hole in your heart and life when that person is gone from you. That's, again, the attitude we have in family. That's what knits us together as men and women, and as children, and as spouses. How is that redeemable? Because that's not the fact That's not the experience of the world. Only, again, this idea of Christ the bridegroom can the whole thing come together properly, because it's a divine intervention into your story, that the damage done by sin in you and me can be overruled by the Spirit of God working. And we don't see sometimes how God can repair what's damaged. He can renovate. You know, people renovate houses. And what you do is you tear down all the walls, all the rot, all the mold. But you leave the frame. And then you build with better material. And sometimes he has to tear down some walls and some rooms and take down some, and put new material, new ideas, change of heart, a change of mind. And only God can change the human heart. You have to understand that one too. We can't manipulate, we can't force, we can't cry, we can't shout it out. Only God, whether you're young or old, can change the heart of a person. And you leave that to God, because it's the power of God that can give us a new heart, a soft heart. We can't beat it in, we can't cry it out. It's just the way we're made. So I want you to understand now, male and female, I just want to introduce masculine qualities and feminine qualities. And designed by God, and just without getting too involved, I submit to you that in the home, in the, shall we say, the grace of God, that there's a balance. There's supposed to be a governmental balance between father and mother and husband and wife in the home. And I've come to observe and learn, as I've reasoned, and maybe you can think about this, that the closest thing to the love of God in the Christian house would be the love of a mother. The love of a mother. And the closest thing to the mind of God, the stability of God's unchangeableness, is the mind of a man. Now, I think some of us women understand that you really can't change a man. You can't change his ways. He's set in his ways. From even boys, just this set is either black or white, black or white. We women are a lot of maybe this, maybe that. We're a lot of maybes, okay? We're a little more flexible. But if they don't like something, they don't like something. An 11-year-old boy asked his mother, and he said, the world is so big, there's so many people in it. He's 11 years old. How do I know who to marry? They're thinking about this. They may talk about it. And so the mother asked me, what do I tell him? I said, tell him this, that a man knows his own mind. He knows what he likes, he knows what he doesn't like, and you can't change it. And God is that way. He's not God, but see, that inflexibility is important to leadership and to decision making. And he has the final word. God has the final word. There's a principle there. But if he's unstable, if he can't make up his mind, boys can't make up their mind. They're going to be a fireman today and astronaut tomorrow, okay? I mean, they know, they're children. All children are basically this way. And you take a boy to an ice cream shop, there's 32 flavors. What's his favorite flavor? Well, he's going to try every one, okay, before he decides. And that's not that's not what you do to find a bride. You don't go in and try all 32 flavors, okay? You're set in your ways. And no, that's manhood. That's good for good decision making. But he has to know how to make decisions. That's part of his biblical education. That's part of what you feed him. That's what you show by example. And what you demand of him when he's 2 years old. You know, I tell the Latin American mothers, you know, you baby your boys. stop bathing your boys. I could talk to Chinese families too, but I won't go there. But what do you mean? Well, you know, little boys, they have a trick. They know how to act helpless, right? If you're the only son, the only brother, okay, you've got 3 sisters or something, okay? And he's the young one, okay? All he has to do is say, oh, it's too hard. I can't, I don't know how. And he cries, and what? Sister will come, grandma will come, mother will come, and it'll be done. And then later on, oh, this homework is so hard, I don't get it. Girlfriend will do it, okay? And before you know it, he's going to marry a woman to be his mother, to do his laundry, to do his cooking, to do his washing, right? That's not manhood, okay? And you start at age 2, you say, when he's talking and when he's walking, pick up your toy and put it in the box. And that'll take 5 hours before he does it.
Yes.
But you say, okay, today's the day, I'm going to do that. And you start forming habits of work. Slavery began in history because somebody didn't want to work. That's all. I'll just make him my slave and he'll wash my car. And he'll do this for me. He'll play. And before you know it, you get more slaves, you get less work. Do you understand? It's the nature of men to be at ease and not work. But in particular, the girls love to do housework. I mean, cook, bake, take care of babies. That's maternal. But manhood, because the most, if I can go on here, there's flexibility and inflexible. Women can be and have to be flexible because they're mothers. They have the babies. They have to learn the language of a baby's cry. They have to have discernment. They have I call it women's intuition. Men don't have that, okay? They don't feel right, but they can't say it in words, okay? They can't say what they feel, but men have to take into account that intuitiveness that mothers have in relationship to their children. And you have to pay attention to it. You can't say, that's not logical. Of course it's not logical. It's female. It's female, okay? We have to have 50 pairs of shoes for every outfit, okay? You only need 2 pairs of shoes, brown and black. That's all you need. Maybe a tennis shoe in there. But it's simple. But we're a little bit more complicated in that way. The reason why I sometimes say men can't understand women, when you think about when God created Eve, he took a rib. He took a rib from his side. I like to think it was the left side. That's where his heart is. And by the way, they're supposed to stand side by side to each other, not one behind or ahead of the other. And in a sense, she has an advantage in the sense that she came from man. And so she has some understanding of him because she came from him originally, right? But where did man come from? Dust. It's just simple dust, okay? So what does he know? Just himself, okay? So we must, and they're meant to be friends, by the way, not enemies to each other. They became enemies when sin came between them. Divorce began at the fall. Marriage was completely annihilated in the world. That's how soon home was ruined. Satan was clever. Get it at the start. But God turned that around. But the relationship between male and female in society, single or married or not, is friendship. And the idea between Adam and Eve was they were best friends. You marry your best friend. And there's a balance between masculine and feminine, not warfare. But it became warfare when she lost her place and was put under him as a consequence. And feminism has to get that idea. That happened because she was an instrument of Satan for man's downfall. How is that going to be repaired? And it can only be repaired through Christ, the bridegroom. That's the only way it can be repaired. Because it's a state of heart and mind. It's an understanding. It's a spiritual thing, not physical, not not intellectual whatsoever. And men have been, and women have been fighting this because there's no resolution to that relationship. And it's been a battle from that point on. So, but I want to deal with the original, okay? And so again, what's that have to do with the nation? This is universal. It's not just America, it's not just the church, it's all of mankind. This is universal history, not just biblical history for just, again, Bible believers. This is from beginning to the end of this world. And we find that after the flood, God said, I'm going to redesign the world. They're not going to be all in one place. I'm going to separate the continents, the land pieces. And now I'm going to deal with men in a different way. Because I've got to renovate. I've got to start again. You know, God has a way of starting again. And he adjusts. He's not condoning sin, but he says, I have to have now a different approach to deal with man after I've destroyed that first generation of that race. And so he said, I'm going to divide the continents into nations. It's like Cain and Abel were brothers. One hated the other because of his nature. There were two separate natures. And Cain hated Abel. That sibling rivalry. I mean, the first family, I'm not talking about the Biden family, I'm talking about Adam and Eve's family. And right off the bat, their first two sons just hated. There was that antipathy from Cain for Abel. Different, separate, same parents, different natures. And you have all kinds of children, but they're individual, and they have their own will and their own nature. And you have to discern what you're dealing with, and God discerned what he was dealing with. And he said, so you have, hypothetically, you have Ham, Shem, and Japheth. They're only people left in the face of the earth, a family, all right? 8 people, Ham, Shem, and Japheth, and their wives. I'm not going to have any repetition. I'm going to try to intervene here. I'm not going to cure the hatred, but I'm going to intervene and mitigate it, okay? And keep all the violence that I had to destroy. And I'm going to govern the violence. I'm going to govern the human race in a different way here because of the sin nature that erupted. And he said, Ham, you're going to Africa. Japheth, you're going to Europe. Shem, you're going to Asia. And I'm giving you, it's like 3 brothers, you have 3 separate bedrooms, okay? You're not going to live together in the same bedroom. Because I know what happens. One of you is sloppy. One of you is a neat freak. The other one just hates the fighting between the 2 brothers. Separate rooms, okay? And a bigger house. Separate bedrooms. Going to separate you. Sin separates. Sin separated Adam and Eve. Now sin separates family members. Within the whole family. Separate bloodlines. Okay. You have your own place, and I'm going to deal with you, your nations, separately. Not as a whole population. Not as a mass of humanity. Separate nations. Separate places. You keep in your place. Of course, they didn't. God's law for nations is keep in your own boundaries. Keep within your borders. They didn't do that. And they won't do that until they know the law of nations. Keep your independence. But one nation will swallow another nation. Again. But the law still stands. The law of marriage still stands, by the way. But the law of nations has not changed. God hasn't changed his rules. The rules are there, but man doesn't keep them. And when he doesn't keep them, nations die and families crumble. Okay? Divorce. 50% now in the church is 16%. I don't know what's going on in the churches today. Can you imagine? But divorce begins when you don't keep the first law of marriage. And I'll show you what that is. So we know that all nations are built on families. This is biblical. That's why the family determines the lifespan of a nation, the lifespan of society, basically. Either collapse based upon the obedience or disobedience of the home. What's going on in the homes? And what are we not following that collapses? We can take pills, we can go to therapy, we can go to all the psychology classes we want. But it's real simple in the origin of marriage. It's right there. But we want to push that way. It says, that's traditional. No, it's biblical. It's from God who made the institution. Go back to the beginning. And so again, you can't say, well, this is cultural. No, in Africa, it's the same law. In Asia, it's the same law. In Europe, in the United States, and South America, same law. If your nation is weak, your family's a problem. That's it. Our nation is sick because our families are sick. Only, where's the remedy? Well, Joshua said, I don't know what you fathers are going to do, but it's for me, my house. Okay, we will obey God. That's what it takes. It starts with a husband, a man, saying, me first. And because he's the leader. He was made first. Pictures are important. Man was made first because he's the first in line. He's the one that will start the whole thing. He starts the whole thing. Marriage starts with a man, not with, I don't know what today it is. But this is where we reason home, nations. The nation isn't the cause of the home. It's not the economy. The economy is a result of the debt in the home, the mismanagement in the home, the lack of economy in the home. So, people say, what's in your pocket? Well, what's in your home? $32, $35 trillion in debt? That comes from the homes, you see. This spending spree our rulers are engaged in comes from our homes. We give them permission to do that. Okay, and that we're not obeying the law that God has set. So let me get here. So if the family is the foundation of the nation, family, nation, what's the foundation of the family? What is it built on? So nations are built on families. What is the family built on? The family is built upon marriage. The most important relationship in the home is the marriage. It's not about the children, it's about the marriage. The security, the emotional security, but also financial security, and every other kind of security. The education is built upon the quality of the marriage. And what's the foundation of marriage? The law of marriage is right there. The man is first. The strength of a marriage depends upon the man. He's responsible for the marriage, not the wife. It begins with an adult male, not just physically adult, but spiritually, emotionally, intellectually. And that's what sometimes is missing. Okay, we look on the outward, but we don't examine the spiritual life, the intelligent life, intellectual mind, the mind and the heart, and the body. That's the complete person, mind, heart, and body. And mothers and fathers, your sons are responsible for homes, the direction, the strength, the protection, the support, the quality of the marriage. It's not about, well, let her do it. Let her do what she wants. We have this fantasy that he's somehow supposed to be a prince on a white horse, giving and serving his wife. Well, he may do that before marriage, but that ain't going to happen after marriage, okay? It's a perversion, and it's carnal. It's not biblical. The manhood of a nation is the strength of the home. And so we have somehow indulged this idea that this fantastic romantic view of marriage and home. So, a man first, adult. When is a man grown and when is a woman adult? Both. I would say age 20, God has drawn a line at age 20. So that's why I say, if your son's still living at home at age 20, he starts paying rent, okay? Or leave, okay? But is he prepared to earn his way? That's why age 2, pick up the toy, put it in the box, okay? Then tomorrow you wash my car. But that's gradual development of his physical responsibility for himself first. But how do you get there? You have 20 years. You have to grow with that child. You have to grow with your children. Don't keep them your child. Both female and male. That's part of home education. That's not the responsibility of the school or any university. That's your responsibility under God. God gave you a child. He says, raise this child up for my use. Not for your use. Not for somebody else's use. How are you going to do it? Well, he gave you directions. It's right there in the Bible. How are you going to do it? You can't give it over to somebody else. You can't give it over to somebody else. He didn't say, now you can hire somebody to come along and tutor in certain, but as far as shaping his life and forming his character and causing him to obey God in your home, that's you. That's you. How are you going to do it? That's where we are in many places. In many places. A man, as again, adult years, is 20 years old. Because how do I come to that? You know the story of the 12 spies. And you know, the 10 reported, we can't do it. God has led us here to just adopt. Some people think that sometimes about homeschool. Why, God, I'm dying here. What are you thinking? All right, I can't do this. Not possible. Forget it. Can't do it. Send them to school. I hear some parents say, we're going to send them to school. We're going to send them to school. Can't do it. Okay. And Joshua, Caleb, look what God has prepared for us. He's going to give us this land of milk and honey. He can do it. He'll do it. I don't know how he's going to do it, but he's going to do it. All your children will graduate from universities. I don't know how you're going to do it, but he's going to do it. Look at Daniel in the book of Daniel in Babylon. How he thrived and he became president of presidents. How is that possible? Homeschooling. He was educated from the Bible and he wowed the whole world. And homeschooling students today are beginning to wow people. Why? Because God is faithful to those who are faithful, who hold the line, of course. So, what happened? They believed the 10. You know, majority rules, the 10 spies. Okay, God said, I can't lead you into that land. You know why I can't lead you into that land? You're not going to follow me. So, I'm going to raise up a generation, 2 generations, that will follow me. And Moses is going to be the teacher. He's going to teach them all the laws that I gave him to that generation. Because you're just out of Egypt. You're fresh out of Harvard College. What am I going to do with you, right? You're out of Yale, you're out of Princeton. You won't go. You're stiff-necked. You're determined to go against me. So you're going to die here. I'm going to let you live for 40 years, okay? I always thought it was a good year to be 19 years old. Wow, you just made it, right? What if you were 19 and God said 20 and over are going to die in this wilderness? But God drew a line. And I think that's a good line. That's a generation. You start a new generation at 20. That's your goal. If you still have young children, you got it. The clock is ticking, okay? What are you going to feed them? How are you going to use the time left? How are you going to train them? What do you have to unteach? What do you have to change in yourself? Because God holds you accountable for the man and woman you raise up. But when he's 20, you give him over to God. And by the way, when he's 20, or she, they don't account to you anymore. They let you know it before then sometimes. But I had a young woman who was 18 years old, and she wanted to move out of the house. She wanted to have her own life. She's a Christian, but she says, it's time for me to go. And I pointed her to this passage. I said, can you give your parents 2 more years? Because that's what God says they have. Will you do that? Let them have 2 more years, and then you can be on your own. That's when you really can answer to God when you're 20. You're a little bit premature right now. A lot can happen in 2 years. And she consented, and it was a beautiful story. Beautiful story. What God had for her in those 2 years was amazing. But 2 years can make a big difference. It doesn't matter what happens before. It's just that the idea of following the path God has laid out for young people as well as parents, you see. So, waiting on God, going according to God's timetable is very important. God has a timetable for each child. It's not the same. And the beautiful thing about home education is you customize it according to the talents, the abilities, and the disposition and temperament of each child. It's not the same. You can't compare one with the other. Of course, you know better than that. And there are no favorites. God has no favorites. In this case, they're 20 years and over. And manhood is when they can give account to God. They know enough to stand before God and say, I know the difference between good and evil. And I did evil or I did good for themselves. They judge themselves. They have a Bible in hand, and they can look at that book and look at their own lives and see if they come together. That's 20. That's the goal. That's spiritual maturity. How do you get there? How do you get there? God shows us the way. And so, again, what about a man? What's he ready to do? Abraham had his faults. We know about Abraham. But he had also, God recognized the good in Abraham. He says, in his household, there is justice. Good justice. That's important. The father administers justice. He makes decisions like a judge about circumstances and about issues, about economy, about everything going in the house. He knows what's happening in the house. And judgment. Now, judgment is punishment. The consequences. He deals out consequences. He doesn't indulge and let things go and delay, and never address anything. All right? So both go together. Good decisions, wise decisions, answers problems, and then deals out good judgment, good consequences, proper consequences. You see, she has her opinion. Of course she has her opinion. She has a say. And she should be respected because they're best friends, because they're side by side. Of course, he listened to Sarah badly. He shouldn't have listened to Sarah when it came to Hagar. But, in any case, in his household, when we make a decision, it's wise to consult each other so that you have a balance in your decision making. But you still have the final say. And she has to yield because that's her nature. That's her choice when she says yes. He has the power to ask for her hand, but she has the power in everything of consent. And before she says yes, when we talk about Rebecca and Isaac, she has to consider, am I able to be under, because again, her position had changed, to be led. Can I trust my life to this man? When your daughter, and a gentleman comes to your house and asks for her hand, your blessing, will you bless my marriage with your daughter? The father has to consider, I've raised this wonderful, beautiful young woman. Can I hand her over to this man? Will she be as secure and safe as I have made her? That's a consideration because her life is in this man's hands. What does she have from him? And the thing is that in this union and the unity between them, her life is in his hands, but his heart is in her hands. And the wounds that a woman can inflict upon a man is awful, because your sons will always be more fragile emotionally than your daughters may be. Women are stronger emotionally. We're just loud. We scream a lot. We make a big noise. But we're stronger emotionally because we're mothers. We have that maternal ability to withstand and endure, if you will. But a man isn't made like that. And wounds go deep and they shut down. Okay? And it just builds and builds until there is explosion. You just have to know that nature. And the news will tell you that's true when you hear about it. In any case, that's that balance, the responsibility of the wife that is sensitive to the fragility of the man. And the man, knowing that she is the weaker, not spiritually weaker, but the physical weakness that she is compared to his power. That to use his power with restraint, if you will, with compassion, kindness. That's also with children. So, so when we think about a man, he is the decision maker, and of course, this leadership thing goes into the next sphere of God's institution, which is the church. What does God require of pastors and bishops and elders? That they rule their house well first. And I don't know if we've overlooked that, but our churches are corrupt or weak because we have not obeyed even that. That you have to be well first within your own immediate sphere before you can take charge of a larger sphere. This goes in business as well. You think, well, that's separate. No, it's not. It is not. Because it's a matter of leadership. So when we go on to leaving his father and mother, that's the second part of the rule. He has to be prepared to support himself. That's very, very simple. Support himself. Feed himself. Pay his own rent. Pay his bills. How do you start? You want to use the car, you buy the gas. You want to have a car, you pay the insurance. You buy your own car. You want to go to college, you go pay your way to college. You work. Do you understand? This independence is not just physical independence, but it means self-support. So you prepare. How are you going to take care of a home if you can't take care of yourself, your own space? Your own closet, your own house cleaning, right? It's not women's work, it's your responsibility to have it done, okay? But you're the keeper. You know, the idea of a husband in Anglo-Saxon language is that he's the support. It's like a house, a band around the house. It holds it together. Holds it together, financially holds it together, physically holds it together, holds the marriage together. How does he hold the marriage together? Well, again, this idea of he knows how to rule his own house, and you know how do you do it? You know, God in the New Testament said to the church, the poor in the church, start your own business. Study to be quiet means think, be still, and start and work with your own hands. Paul was the tent maker. We have Lydia made purple. She was a wealthy woman. She worked from her own house, but she had her own business. That's the idea of entrepreneurship. America is the richest nation ever in the history of mankind because of entrepreneurship, because of small family business. That's your inheritance. That's your legacy for the next 2 generations. You're supposed to leave an inheritance to your children's children. You better start saving. That's what God says. A good man, how many good men do we have here? Leaves an inheritance to his children's children. That's a generational wealth. But you teach them how to keep that wealth. You just don't hand them $1 million. I have a family who's pretty wealthy, and his children are already counting what they get when he dies. Can you imagine? He says, what do I do about that? Well, you did that. That was your doing, okay? Because you love money, they're going to love your money, okay? So I said, well, why don't you do this? You tell them early, you're not going to get anything I have until you make your first million. Your own first million, okay? Or you get nothing. Because he never taught them to do anything but get. Give me. You raise that up. Okay, children, you don't want to care of this. But you got to raise your own million, okay? Before you get into their honest to Pete, right? Think about it. What good are you doing for them? Because you hand them over your wealth and they're going to waste it in 1 year. You see that over and over again because you have not raised them up to manage $1, let alone $1 million. Make sense? Okay. Go home and pick up your toys. Okay. So then he says, I promise you, that's why America is still not bottomed out yet, okay? Because of family wealth. Your own private wealth, not government wealth. The government has no money. So, again, work with your own hands. You have a talent, you have skill, you can produce something. In fact, the first thing God told Adam to do was be fruitful. It doesn't mean have 1 million children. Be fruitful means produce something out of those trees. Make your food, pick that fruit. It's not going to fall into your mouth, right? Make fruit salad or something, whatever that fruit was. Maybe it had meat in it, I don't know, I hope so. But it had enough for his body. But he had to pick that fruit, he had to make something from it, then he has to plant more, he has to plant more trees. Because there was no fall, spring, and summer and winter in the garden. You ate fruit, it didn't grow by itself. There's no season. He had to take those seeds and plant those seeds that he didn't eat and grow more trees. That was a beautiful thing, right? So, that's what God says economy is. You produce something, you multiply it, you don't spend everything you have, you save, you're frugal, and bills and bills and bills. You teach them that. You know, I heard a complaint that on television, I think, or something, and she was complaining about public schools. And I thought, oh, this is silly. She says, my child graduated from high school, or college, and he can't even balance his checkbook. Why don't you teach him at home how to balance his checkbook? Depending upon the state schools to teach your children how to balance a checkbook. Probably doesn't have any money to balance. But see how dependent, that is not the work of government. Education is the work of parents. All. That's a hard thing to face when you think about God said that's your responsibility, not Moses' responsibility. Okay, what are you going to do about that? God has a remedy for our nation. And we have to go back to the scriptures, not leave them, not find a better way. There's no better way than God's way. He made us. He knows what works. Okay, well. So, again, so this idea of earning and being, as a man especially. Now, we live in a time where women didn't depend upon, and family didn't depend upon economically the dependency of the woman on the, for lack of education or opportunity. But your daughters also need to know how to earn, in a sense, and how to manage, because they're going to manage a household of things, and how and all of this. Some of them are very good shoppers anyway, but maybe they shop for the wrong things. Nevertheless, they keep, but the idea of you contribute to the well-being of your household, if as a woman, if you're educated, if you know how to manage yourself as well. I don't recommend that women leave their fathers and mothers like a man should, but if they can, and if it's ability, that's all right. But I think especially the men, because it says a man should leave his father and mother. And then, this is the vow he makes. He cleaves to his wife. This idea of cleaving is not cutting her up, okay? I know. It's an Anglo-Saxon word, means you stick with, you stay with. And the reason why their poverty comes into any nation is the men don't stay. That's the main cause of poverty. When the responsibility for the safety and support of the home is not there. We see it over and over again. And so when I say divorce begins in the beginning, it's because we don't begin with a man. Okay? And you can almost see an inevitable divorce when the man is at the beginning of this law, the rule. And the responsibility of parents is to raise up men and your sons. Make sense to you? It's vital, not just to the future, their future and their family's future, the nation's future. But it's a generational thing. It's a generational thing. The consequences can be repaired. I don't say, but it's going back to the beginning of things. You start again. You start again. Start right by consent. In any case here, and so we find that cleave unto his wife. It's the vow, that's his vow. That's the most important vow in a marriage. People write their own vows. She has his and he has his. She has hers. But the thing that holds it together is the man says, I'm never leaving, no matter what happens. A man's word is his bond. And that's his vow. That's the only vow that counts. I'm staying this. It's not, oh, well, if this doesn't work, we can always divorce. That's not marriage. It's living together until we get sick of each other, okay? This is not manhood. This is not home. This is not marriage. It's if you get sick, if things happen, I'm going to stay. And I've had stories of men who went through goes through all that. They're men because they're strong. When they make a decision, they stay. They stay. I always like to think of an example being in a wagon wheel. You know about wooden wagon wheels? Wagon wheels, you have the rim on the outside. You have the hub on the inside, right? And you have the spokes. I don't know, we're living in driverless cars today, electric cars, but there's a wagon wheel somewhere in our history, okay? And I always think of the rim, the outside, being the father, the man. And the hub, and his life revolves around that hub. That's the woman, the heart. That's his why he gets up in the morning, goes to work, and does what he does, because that's where his heart is. His life is centered around her. And the spokes are the children they have with each other. But if that rim breaks, the whole thing collapses. That's the point. You hold it together. Hold it together by your presence, by your firmness, that you've set your mind to it, and that you're not going anywhere. You're not going, no matter what happens, whatever it happens, whatever she does and doesn't do, doesn't matter. Look at the story of Gomer, Hosea, Gomer, the prostitute wife. Her name was Gomer. I wouldn't name my daughter Gomer, but I must mean something. But she was unfaithful time and time again. And he would go buy her back, rescue her, take her back. That's a picture of God in Israel. He's going to take her back. He's never going to let her go. That's the husband. It said, God says, I am Israel's husband. the unfaithful wife, covenant breaker, but I'm staying because I promised I would. I promised Abraham. Do you understand? It's not casual. And that's what you're looking for. So when it comes to, when he looked back, God said, what is the idea is not a help meet. Now, if meet, M-E-E-T, or help meet in the Bible, sometimes it's meant, oh, she's going to help me through college, or she's going to pay my bills until I graduate. That's not a help meet, okay? Or she's going to pay 50% of the rent. That's not what it means. Help, suited, suitable. That's a perfect match. That's what help meet means. Not she's going to help me support my career. She's going to do all these things. No, a match. It's like left shoe, right shoe. They match. They're the same shoe, but one's the left and one's right, and you walk together, side by side, in everything. Nobody makes a unilateral decision without conferring or talking or speaking together, but he still is responsible for what happens. Well, I'll let her decide. You do that, you still are responsible for the consequences. How about that? You can't escape. You can run, you hide, like Adam did, but you can't escape your responsibility. Mm-hmm. You know, sometimes we think, I just have this question, it's not an answer, I don't know. I'm just thinking in my own little head. Okay, some people have a first wife, right? Or they call them my ex, okay? And they may have 3 exes, okay? It doesn't matter how many exes you have. And then they have this one, the one they're supposedly with now, okay? How many wives does this man have? He has 4. An ex-wife is still a wife, right? Why do you call her wife? See? So polygamy still exists, okay? Because he left somewhere, he left these 3. Or there was no real marriage, okay? Do you understand what I'm saying? So again, how many wives does he have? He would say, I only have 1. I have 3 exes, but I have 1. Well, I say he had 5, 4. That's just my opinion. That doesn't mean it's true. But you think about how we kind of explain away irresponsibility. Mm-hmm. Do you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So it's a vocabulary. Somehow it's not logical. It's, it dismisses it. So what happened? Satan went to Eve first because he knew, and so did God know, what would happen. That his heart was bonded to Eve's heart. And there was no solution at the point. If he's going to cleave to his wife, he's going to be where she is. I mean, it's sort of like, this is impossible. It's like, which of your children is worth more to you? They can't answer that one, right? What's Adam going to do? Inevitably, okay? He's not going to leave her. At the same time, by disobeying God, he's conflicted. True? You think about it. Well, he's going to try to save her. No, he can't save her with his life. So what I'm saying here is that Satan knew how to take man down. He really did. He's crafty. Some young people, sometimes they think they're kind of smart, especially when they're about 13, before they're 20. They know a lot. Mom, you know nothing. You're not up to speed here, okay? You mean you don't know what's her name? I don't even know her name. Okay, Taylor Swift or something? What's her name? What's her name? Okay, I can't keep up. But there's always some celebrity you're supposed to know about and you don't know about, so you're out of the loop, okay? Well, these girls thought so, with her mother. And the mother asked her, I said, ask your girls this. Okay, you're very smart. You're smarter than me. For sure you're smarter than me, though you're younger. But are you smarter than the devil? No human being is smarter and more crafty than the devil. Some of your children are pretty crafty. Boy, you know how to run rings around your mother and father. Whoa, you know how to manipulate, you know how to lie, you know how to just get around them, you know how to cry, you know how to do everything and get your way. But no one can get around the devil. You're not smart. And so that kind of humbled me a little bit. There's only one person that's smarter than the devil. That's God. You got to rely on that. Because there are a lot of scams out there. You've been scammed, betrayed, yeah. Easy, very subtle, they're smart. And they act well, they sound just wonderful. And then you fall into a trap. There's great losses. So, and that's what happened. Satan used her femininity against herself. I won't go into deep. And he used Adam's manhood against himself. Do you understand how the devil can do that? Use something that's good in you against yourself? He does it all the time. He can take a musician who's a genius, songwriters, movie makers, and use those talents against themselves, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. You got to be careful how Satan can use the best of you to take you down. Okay? You're a genius in math, engineering, mathematics. Boy, you're walking high. And then he'll take those gifts and use you and destroy you with it. That's how bad he is. So wicked. You think, oh, how can everyone? But that's how it is, folks. So, that's what happened here. And she did what? She was now corrupted. That's the sad part. She was corrupt, and he was not yet corrupted. What's he going to do? He's going to get corrupted. Definitely. That's the downfall. And what did he say to God? The woman you gave me, God. So he didn't take responsibility for it. But there's some truth in it, but he still was a decision maker, right? No matter what. You can say, well, you make me angry, but you got angry. You decided to be angry. Do you see what I'm saying? You had a choice. And so he chose Eve, which is a seduction, which is, again, but he decided. He was not fooled. Okay, she was fooled, using her own femininity against herself. But he was a definitive thinking man, okay? And it was deliberate. And so that's what happened. And God said the consequence. This is where patriarchy began. As a consequence, Eve, you're going to be now ruled by him. You've lost your place here, your position. You're going to be here. Because that's a consequence. This is a terrible consequence. It's important. And she's going to be blamed. She's still being blamed. Take any religion. How are women treated except in Christianity? They're lower class. They're either slaves or they're property. Or they're kept, right, out of sight. You understand? Because some women will tell you that's how they feel and are treated even today. Because the blame game is still going on. Oh, she didn't cover her ankle. That's why I committed adultery. Or her scarf isn't on right. She should be stoned. Do you understand? That's going on, right? Mm-hmm. Because she's still being blamed for his own weakness, for his own sinful heart, mm-hmm. for his thoughts, for his actions. I couldn't help it. Mm-hmm. Do you understand? That's the world. She's responsible for her own purity. You ever heard that one? She's responsible for her own purity. That's not true. All she has to say is no. Are you kidding me? When did no ever work? No, we know better. That's foolishness. And you know it too. All right? Just say no to drugs. Just say no. Okay. So again, her desire will be trying to overthrow that. That's when men and women became enemies, right there. You understand? Her resentment and his domination. Do you understand? All those things they say in women's lib is true, but that's the consequence. Mm-hmm. And the battle that we have in our homes between husbands and wives, and this resentment, the man blaming her for making him do what he doesn't want to do. You ever got that one? She made me do it. But with her wiles, with her ways, her manipulation. Go figure, right? That's still going on. And so this is where the patriarch thinking is alive and well, and it shouldn't be in the Christian home. It's everywhere else, but should not be in the Christian home because of Christ the bridegroom. Because he redeemed marriage. He brought it back to its original with the power of the Holy Spirit in man and woman. She's brought back to her place beside him. Because Satan used Eve to bring man down. But God used Mary, a woman, to save him. Do you understand that? Mary is the one that brought womanhood to a place of honor, not dishonor anymore. Without a woman, there could be no Savior. Do you understand? And without the sweet innocence of Mary and the belief of Mary and the faith of Mary and the vessel of Mary, willing vessel, that she would face all kinds of misunderstanding, all kinds of guilt. But she was willing. And the thing that came to her was not man's seed, it was the seed of the Holy Spirit. Do you understand? The seed is what brings life. But it's the Holy Spirit. Was it not Adam's seed? It was Christ's Spirit. And that is the beginning of redemption, of regeneration, of the institution of marriage. And if families from Christ would be formed, it could change a whole nation. Do you understand? We have fallen away as in our history. No other nation has fallen away but America. Because other nations, I go to South America, many times, it has been many times over the 25 years, but I say you are a new nation. You're moving toward becoming a self-governing nation. We were once self-governing. Don't follow us. We forgot. We have to go back to the beginning of our nation, which is Bible-centered. Does that make sense to you? They're just coming out of Catholicism, and they are just getting the Bible now and learning about how to be governed by God. That's wonderful. They can do it. I see it merging. But it doesn't stop from the top down. It starts from stop babying your boys. And the women stand up and applaud. Okay? It's funny. It's funny. But you know, the young boys that I talk to that are there, the youth before marriage, when they hear this, they say, I want to be that kind of man. I want to be that. And they never saw that image because they had been taught that they were just to be helped. Okay? They always need help. No. They're full of help. So, this is where Christ... So how do you know he's the one, ladies? Oh dear. Can I have 5 more minutes? Okay. This is lunchtime. You getting hungry? Okay. This is Chinese food here. Okay? Chinese food. Christ, the bridegroom, is the new man. And the bridegroom's come back. And now he has the power of Christ to do the work of a husband, to do the work, to keep his vow. Okay? It can't be done in his flesh. It cannot be done through any college degree or book reading. It's going back to God's law of marriage. And so what did Christ do? Lay down his life for the church, his bride. Is this man willing to take a bullet for you? I'm not talking about for democracy. I'm talking about for you. Or will he make you a shield for the bullet? Will he use you to cover himself? That's misusing you. Do you understand? There's a difference. It could be metaphorically or even physically. I was speaking with some Korean people, and I mentioned this idea of, would you step in traffic to keep your wife from being hit by a car? This man, he should have kept his mouth shut. And he said, without even thinking, that's impossible. Oh, if I was his wife, I'd die 1,000 deaths. But she was there. I don't know what happened afterwards. And immediately he responded, that's not possible. I would do that. Because he's used to being protected himself, you see. It should be automatic. It should be without hesitation. Jesus went to the cross without reservation, fully consenting with God's will for him. Your will, not my will. And that's what men have to do. Your will, not my will, first. So, when he laid down his life for your daughter, would he take a bullet? Would he step between life and death? That's important. And I've had women come to me and say, I don't think my husband would do that for me. That's sad. Sad. So, second thing, will he keep the bride pure for himself before the feast? Now, there's no human perfection, of course. And it's not just purity of body, but purity in many other ways. But Jesus said that he will come, when at the bridal feast, she will be chaste. He will keep her chaste. Okay. Now, what does that mean? And you apply it all the way around. Fathers, brothers, husbands, you're responsible for the purity of your daughters, your sisters, and wives. It's not her ability, because it's Joseph. Think of Joseph in Potiphar's house. She was chasing after him like 24/7, over and over, trying to seduce him. And he avoided her. He was doing all he could until he turned around and said to her, how can I do this thing against God? That's what he said to her. His master, he was supposed to do everything she wanted him to do. He was her slave, and he would not, because he had so much power over his own body, his own will, if anything. And so he had so much power over his own body. You know what? He said to his feet, run. And he ran. But she caught his coat. Do you understand? She had revenge upon him. But that's the power of a man over his own body, his own will, if you will. Do you understand? That's a man. He's the one who says no to himself, not her saying no to him. What woman can fend off a man just by no? That's not happening. We see in the news it's not happening. Say no all you want. And we've reversed it. We say she's responsible because she dresses wrong, she talks wrong, she does this and she does that. I can't help it. You have to have power to help it. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. And that starts from birth. You have to train them about their appetites for food, appetites for pleasures, appetites for video games. Yes. That's the kicker. It's the video games. They're a slave to that game, whatever it is. That's no power. They're slaves to something, some fleshly, carnal, material stuff. You with me here? It starts age 2. Pick up your toy and put it in the box. Turn that off. If you can't turn it off, so you keep saying 5 more minutes, 5 more minutes, one more game, you're a slave. You're a slave. And that goes into every area of life. Every area, whether it's you're a workaholic or alcoholic or whatever aholic you may be. Do you understand with me? You're framing and shaping a character traits. It becomes habits you're forming of saying no to things. And Mom, you're not going to be popular. Dad, they're going to hate you. You're saying no to everything. Well, you're not asking the right things. You're asking for a scorpion. And I'm supposed to give you scorpions? No. I want to give you good things, not deadly things. You have to say no to your children. And then the last thing was that, what does the bridegroom do? This is rightly related to the bride. Okay, present himself a glorious church himself. And what? Let's see. and he nourishes and cherishes her. He feeds her. How about that? She doesn't feed him, he feeds her. If he eats, she eats. If he has new clothes, she has new clothes. Probably more than he has. That's okay, please. Okay, so again, he takes care of her, meets her necessities, right? All her necessities. If I say to husbands who say, well, I can't live on one salary, I said, well, when you tell your wife, you're hiring your wife to somebody else to help you take care of her. If you have to hire her to help you take care of her, she can take care of herself. Why does she need to marry you, right? Because she's going to be the mother of your household, your children. But not only that, do you understand? A man can build a house, a man can buy a house, but he cannot have a home without a woman in it. When mom's not home, it's a cave. Really cold, no food, you don't know where anything is, disorganized, dirty clothes, right? Dust everywhere. It's not a home. It's an empty building. They come home and it's dark and nobody's there. It's empty because it's a woman that makes a house a home. A woman can live by herself and make herself a home. A man, all he needs, a can of beans, no curtains, no flowers, and a t-shirt and jeans. That's all he needs. A bachelor. But it's not a home. He can live in a tent. It's not a home. She brings that feminine quality of comfort, of hospitality, of warmth into a space. True? Not. Why do babies prefer their mothers when they're sick? And why do babies prefer their fathers when they want to play? Difference, huh?
Yeah.
No comfort there. He just tosses you up in the air. You can catch you. You love that. You know, roller coaster, everything. But not when you're sick. Not when you're sleepy. Clear? That balance, that's important. So, along the bridegroom, men, okay, don't say yes to everything and anything. By the way, Rebecca, when they came to her and said, Isaac's father wants you to be his son, it's sort of an arranged marriage. And you think, oh, that's not right. But the thing is, the parents of Rebecca asked her, do you really want to go now? Do you want to go? And it was by consent. She said, I will. That's the marriage. She said, I will to do it. It's not forced. It's not forced. And by the way, if he's forced to marry, he's not obligated to stay. That's the important thing. If he's manipulated into marriage, if he is forced into marriage, he's not obligated to stay. It's by his choice, not anybody else's. But she has a choice of consent. She's not a slave either. So it was arranged by God, and she saw that it was so. By faith, she did that and went. Is that important? It's not. She's not taken by the hair and dragged into his cave. Okay, not at all. But today there are those such things. So think about it for yourself. Okay, that's it.
So this is such a pleasure and delight. I had waited to hear from Ms. Dang for more than 10 years, and to have her here live.
She should be dead.
While we were waiting for to figure out how to unlock the clubhouse, I shared some regrets and mistakes I made, and Ms. Dang said, once she said, you have to learn to have compassion with what you don't know, with your ignorance. And so with that, I want to just thank all of you for coming, and for those that could stay. The good part begins, because the time to be able to chat and pick Miss Dan's brain about any little thing in life is just going to be so rich. So thank you all. Yeah, thank you.
Question?
Question? Yes.
Is it okay if I ask a question while everybody's here really quick?
Yes,
Okay, so I'm thinking about this, the education of boys. where you said, you want them to, they end up being able to, your goal is to get them to be able to be independent, right? And so those of us who are educating our boys at home, and they're, have tendency to be quite independent in the first place. I think about my language as I'm talking to my son, and my constant question is, do you need my help? Right?
Yeah.
Can I help you?
You're just
Can I
doing
help
that.
you?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, is there a language?
You say that to your husband?
Sometimes, yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
even this morning before
I would
we were
rather
eating.
say, could you help me? Could you help me with this? Or carry this for me with you? And you know you can't.
Right.
Okay? But he has to do something, not because you're calling like a maiden in distress. You're not a maiden in distress.
Right.
That's right. That's a
Right.
good idea.
So I thought about this, like when we're teaching, for example, math, and he thinks he knows it all. Instead of saying, can I help you? Would it be helpful to say something like, can you show me how you do this? And maybe
Not
offer
can, show me how you did this.
show me how.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
can. Of course I can.
Right.
Maybe I can.
Right.
But show me. Okay, then this. It's not the pleading.
Yeah.
You're not pleading with him.
Yeah.
It's a direct.
Yeah. That's so good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good question. I'll tell you the 3 A's for women. Men, shut your ears. They need to be admired for their physicality. They're physical beings. Oh, look how tall you are. Wow, you're strong. Or that was a good pitch. And you're so strong. You're so handsome. You say that once a month, it'll go for 3 years. Honest to Pete,
Yeah.
they need to be affirmed that you're on their side. You're not against them. Okay. Now you don't say, "Can I help you?" But you're listening. Okay. You're affirming that you're attentive, that you notice them. Okay. And then you have to appreciate whatever they do. Whatever they do, and they'll do some more. They'll do more than you want.
Thank you.
That's affecting them. Okay. Because I don't know. It just works.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, I see the difference between
You're a cheerleader.
Yeah.
They need cheerleading.
This goes for sons and husbands.
Yes.
Well, they're males.
Yeah.
They're males. That's all they ask. Don't take them for granted. I don't. Especially for lifting heavy things. Okay?
Thank you.
Sure. Any more? Okay, I'm going to sit down for a minute.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was talking.
Well, you mentioned restoring marriage and things like what would be some of the things?
Well, Eve was the first one to transgress. Okay? So my observation working with families for almost over 50 years, this is nothing new, and I came to the conclusion, since she was the first to transgress, she's the first to get in her place, rightful place. Because we women will interrupt God's work in the man. Because we think they're going to do it for us. Or if our love is enough, it's their love for God that has to work, not for you. Because that was Adam's problem. He loved her before God. Okay? And we're trying to use the same system to get him to do God's work. No, it has to be between him and God. And if we step and trust God, because you're answerable to God, and he doesn't say you take charge of him, but that you let me take charge of you, the wife, and you see what happens. I've seen it over and over again. And it's like meek and quiet, but you have great power over him. The wife has great influence. He wants to please, he wants to have peace, he wants to enjoy your marriage, and he almost compromised himself to do that. You can't make him do that. Okay? And he's hardworking, he is to be appreciated, not to be used for your will. There's a story in King Arthur and his knights. And there was a riddle he had to answer to save his own life. And the riddle is, what do women want most? Okay? And I thought, you would say, well, love, no. And really, the answer was, she wants her way. No. Okay, yeah, she wants her way. So we got to step out of the way. Okay? And I've seen that he will step back into his place when we step out of his place. You see? Yeah.
To follow up with that.
Okay.
So, I think maybe women tend to want more, they see, and then they want to push things and make things happen.
Push is not good.
Right. So then right, and then I think Satan knew that, right? And
Yeah.
do you want to be like God, right? Do you want to direct?
Well,
So-
I interpret it as, do you want to be more beautiful? That's how we go into
So then, and then you said men are inflexible, right? They know yes or no.
they're meant to be set
So,
in good things.
yeah, so are women made, like in a marriage, what men say?
Okay, it's our approach to the men.
Okay.
It's very important. I work with many men. I have a lot of good friendships, and the reason I approach them not with commands, not why don't you do it this way, or you're not, I don't agree with you. Those are not good communications. But I will ask him to teach me something, teach me what you know, or ask him, explain this to me. I want him to teach me. I don't want to be teaching him. I had a wife, she was telling me this, and she thought I would take her side. And so she was explaining that they were having a conversation in the kitchen or someplace, and it got into an argument. And then she said, wait a minute, I want to teach you something. And you know what he said to her? I don't want a teacher, I want a wife. And I said, your husband's right. You're out of place with him. So you have to want what is proper for me as a wife. How do I approach my spouse properly? And it's not respectful. You have to be respectful. And it's owed to him, not because it's not a should, it's his position. Because he's responsible for the whole thing, whatever he says. And I'm not responsible, he's responsible. So I have to be careful not to, overstep. So that's important. And you approach your sons the same way at a certain point when they're in their young, I don't call them teenagers. Don't ever refer to your children as teenagers. They may be teens, but they're not teenagers. By the time they get 13, maybe a little bit before, they're young men and young women. And you have to respect their manhood and their womanhood. And we get in the area of sex education. Don't go there. Teach about manhood and womanhood, but close your ears, children. But when you say, how do I teach, this business of sex education in school? Well, that's all it's about. Then they will go do it. You teach them how, they'll go do it. No, you're talking about manhood, all of womanhood. Make sense to you? Don't go there with that blank education.
Yeah, we told our daughters that, if there are boys that want to ask you out, you tell them, you gotta ask my dad. And I'm just thinking, reimagining the conversation in the garden with the serpent, it sounded as if he was talking to the woman. When people have, and I wonder if Eve has said, I gotta ask Adam.
Well, no, that was one thing she overstepped. She didn't consult her husband. And women are still not consulting their husbands. And they make plans for the whole family. That's wrong. Yeah. But she was seduced. She was overwhelmed by the emotion that was being stirred in her. Because who doesn't want to have good food for her family? Wow, I've got to get this. And it's beautiful to look at. And it's going to make me more beautiful. So why not? I'm going to be a goddess.
Thank you.